Hi everyone, good evening. Hi Apur.
Hi, Anna.
Yeah. So guys, we are live in the session and till the time we are trying to upload the screen, there's some technical issues that is coming up. Let's start with the introductions. So hi, I'm Amar and I'm an associate director here at Tsaaro Consulting. It's been 8 years I am into privacy and security, handling different regulatory risks, and now I'm leading a practice of privacy here at Tsaaro. Over to you, Apur, for your introduction.
So thanks, Amar. Hi, I'm Apoorv, co-founder CEO of 𝗹𝗲𝗴. We Before this, I was leading data science and privacy at Facebook. So have been with data privacy field for around 8 years now. We started 𝗹𝗲𝗴 a year and a half back. So we are solving for data security and privacy right now. Have been Saro's partner for some time. Really be looking forward to today's chat.
Thanks, Apurv. I think we are running into a technical challenges by uploading the slide, but let's start the discussion in the meanwhile. So, the topic for us today is legacy data under DPDPA and what will be the best practices around that. So, Apurv, can you just explain the audience what is legacy data?
Sure. So, couple of things to add there, like in terms of legacy data, right? So, legacy data is two things. One is like all the data that you have collected so far that is stored into your systems, right? Like in any of your database, data sources, etc. Legacy data also sometimes consists of the data that is stored at your endpoint, that is your laptops, etc., or that you have shared with vendors, etc. Right? And then also it's about like the validity of the data, like whether the data is stored in the right way, whether the data is used in the right way, etc. So legacy data technically consists of both the data that is collected and stored, so basically data at rest, as well as how it is being used and circulated. So yeah, like that's I think a good summary of what legacy data is and why this legacy data has become suddenly become really important is in today's data driven world everyone is collecting a lot of data, right? Companies have terabytes, petabytes of data, and like if you ask an engineer they will be like, yeah, let's create a log for this, let's create a log for that. If you ask a data analyst or a data scientist they will be like, yeah, we need this data, we need that data, right? And then at some point you end up realizing that you have so much data you don't even have an understanding of like what data you have, how it is being used, which becomes a huge privacy as well as security concern.
Yeah, in this data-driven world, you're correct that everyone is collecting a lot of data for different purposes. Now, with new regulations coming in, so Companies Act also stated that you should now collect data for seven years. Now, that will be a lot of data for every company, right?
Correct. So, I mean, even then, like, so for example, RBI has certain regulations around data storage, right? Like, RBI is very strict, I think, one of the strictest bodies in the world, uh, where you cannot delete the transaction related data for 10 years, right? So, there are different rules that governs the data at some form or the other, depending on how serious the uh, data is, right? And how serious the consequences can be around that data being misused, right? A very simple example is that why transaction data is really important, even in legacy side of the things, is let's say if RBI has to uh, basically investigate any potential, the data, any potential money laundering or anything, this kind of data becomes really important.
Yes. Perfect. So, moving on. So, can you throw some light on the regulations that consent management and talks about legacy data that
Sure.
all the companies are keeping right now?
Sure. So I think as everyone can see on the screen, right, like why legacy data has suddenly come into picture is because everyone talks about consent management when it comes to our DPDPA. But I think what people miss is that even to take that consent management, you have to actually have to understand what data you have collected from the user, how it is being used, right, and like where it is being shared. So all of these things become super important because companies have to do the retrospective of all of these things. They have to understand, and they have to then send the notice to the end user that hey, like this is how we are using the data, right? And then comes the consent part, that user can actually add or remove any consent for that previous data, and then company has to immediately stop using that particular data. So that's one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing right now, that the data is so scattered they don't even know where it is. And that's where the compliances regarding data legacy specifically comes up under DPDPA, that like the data needs to be told to the user that this is what we have from you.
So basically, what you're mentioning is whatever legacy data we are storing, all the challenges that comes with it, and all the users have all the rights, right?
Yeah.
With the new law coming in.
Mhm. Right. So with the new law, like the user need to know what data they have shared with the companies or the organizations, right? How those are being used, etc. So all of those different rights have been given to the user right now, right? Now again, certainly as everyone can see, that like there need to be a notification to the user, consent withdrawal mechanism, redressal mechanism, right? Subject right request. Everything is correlated with okay, like this is the data, this is the purpose, this is how it is being shared. Now, do you agree to this purpose or not? Okay, if not, then the consent is removed. Redressal mechanism or subject right request is also pretty similar. That hey, like can you delete my data? Can you erase my data, right? And the data that has been collected needs to be deleted, then you need to actually understand where the data is, and that's where the biggest issue the legacy data creates.
Yeah. So as you rightly mentioned, so there are many challenges what we felt around legacy data. So these are some of the challenges like incomplete records. We don't know where the data is actually,
Correct.
right? And there is limited communication, outdated contact information, hampers efforts, everything is outdated. So there are legacy systems which are shut down, but the data is still there.
Right. So that's definitely one of the things that happens, right? That uh, the data sprawl is so much, everyone just kept on collecting data. So that is definitely there. Shadow data, shadow ID is there. Then data contextualization, like what was the context of that particular data? Like I collected it 10 years back. No one knows why they collected that certain data, right? Then again, like the records are not complete in some cases, right? People don't know, like companies don't know, the teams keeps on getting changes, the infra guy have changes, the someone who actually built that database infra, they have moved on to some three different companies now. No one actually understands this infra into how things can be done. So yeah, there are actually a lot of governance challenges, contextualization challenges, and challenges to actually understand and actually having the ownership. Who do you give the ownership of particular data within a company, right? How do you even decide that? So yeah, those are some of the core challenges that I foresee and that I have seen in my personal experiences at the companies that I have worked. Amar, like if you want to add something to it.
Yeah, so these are the challenges. I agree, but there are certain challenges. So I'll give you a case scenario, Abul. So what I faced recently was, so I was working for a fintech client. Now
Correct.
what they said was we are implementing consent that is okay for the upcoming customers. Now
Correct.
what should I do for my legacy customers? I have all the data, but how should I take consent because I'm still processing the data? Now for some of them, we thought of a solution that we can give you a pop-up notification and user can agree, but
Correct.
then we when we deep dived into it, we also thought of a situation where customers are not using that app, but the client is still keeping their data. How should we
Correct.
notify? How should we take a consent?
So I think, Amar, there are two things, and I think like this is a discussion that we have had with a lot of companies, and we have had with the ministry as well, right? So we have been working with the Ministry of Information Technology, which actually brought up the DPDPA. So I guess the rule that is coming up, right? Like the clarity in terms of the final law that will happen maybe post election now, that will give the company the clarity into how much time that data can be stored, right? For example, like for fintechs, it's pretty clear that like there are certain data that needs to be stored for 10 years. Certain other data will have to follow the DPDPA timeline, which will say that if the user is not using the application anymore, then after a certain amount of time, that data needs to be deleted. Uh, that certain amount of time can be 6 months or 9 months. No one has clarity right now, but there will be that certain amount of time in such cases where that data has been collected, data is present, but since the user hasn't used the app for a certain amount of time, then you need to delete that data.
Yeah, and the biggest challenges that the company will face is finding the data.
Yes, exactly.
So
So yeah,
now moving on. So let's discuss around the compliances best practices. So what do you think? So what is the minimum as of now? We know some few things about DPDPA.
correct.
The best practices which a company can adopt so that it is easier for them after the rules and they are also compliant.
Correct. So I think there are few things, right, Amar? Like even before jumping into like what are the best practices, how they can become compliant, etc. I think one of the things that companies need to think of or start thinking of is that DPDP is certainly coming up, right? Everyone knows that it's certainly coming up. There are huge penalties. Privacy is going to be really important at some point. It took Europe 5 years. It might take India 10 years, but the fines have been imposed since like day zero. It doesn't matter the size of the company, type of the company. So I think the biggest challenge that companies are facing is that currently there are very few people who are actually thinking about DBDBA within the companies, right? Every organization needs those internal champions so that companies can start thinking about those DPDPA best practices, how they can solve those problems, because these are not easy problems to solve, right? This will require both internal efforts as well as external efforts, both in terms of services as well as tooling to actually solve this problem. And I think, like from our experiences, we have seen that a lot happening right now.
Yeah, Apur,
Coming
on
to
this, I remember a perfect line. Someone told me that privacy is not a project, it's a journey.
Yes, exactly. It's a journey, and a journey need to be taken by multiple parties. Like, not a single party can actually solve for it. Then, coming to best practices now, right? And Amar, if you want to add anything to what I said, would love to hear your opinion on that before moving to the best practices.
No, I think I agree with you. So there would be more clarity around the rules, and before jumping into compliances best practices, it's more about awareness across companies around privacy and across departments also, because even the departments at a granular level they should know what is privacy and how can they help in coming to a certain compliant form.
Correct. And like one of the biggest thing that we have seen is that in India, every company has like 5 or 10 companies under them, right? Every
Exactly.
like company that you see, for example, any fintech that you will see, they have a mutual fund service, that's a separate company. They have a payment service, that's a separate company. They have onboarding, like they have a banking service, that's a separate company. So there are like 10 companies under each of the fintech. Doesn't matter the size, right? Very simple example. And what ends up happening is that cross data usage has become so prevalent that data has been collected for, let's say, mutual fund. It is being used by, let's say, some other payment service like you don't even know right now. How do you even get that clarity? Product teams don't have that clarity right now, right? Because what people solve for is ease.
Yeah.
right? At the end of the day, that okay, like there is a data, there is a service, just let me call that API and I am done, right? My product is live, but no one knows what is actually happening inside, and then that's a huge breach. And these things will take time solving, and I think like that's the first best practice I think that someone can take, is that make sure that you start the journey today. Ideally you should have started yesterday, but don't late, right? Then again, like how you can get to DPDPA, yes, like there are things like purpose mapping, providing clear notices, appointing a DPO, having a proper vendor contract management, having all these integrations into these notifications and stuff. But I would say that these are also part of the journey. Like these are like specific part of the journey, that understand what data you have collected, what is the legacy data, then how that legacy data has is being used, right? And I know that this can't be done in a day, and you can't do that completely for legacy data, but at least start it for the new data that you are collecting, right? Any new application that you are spinning up, know what is the purpose of that, right? uh,
Exactly. So in an SDLC practice, data privacy controls should be implemented.
Correct. So, in on a day-to-day basis, start pushing your teams, product teams, engineering teams to actually understand some of the things, so that when this is actually being implemented for the legacy data, they you don't face resistance from them, because we have worked with some certain companies. They did this manual process by working with product companies, product teams, right? Product teams first of all didn't enjoy doing that, because they have also a lot of work. Their KPIs are very different, and then also what ends up happening is that they give you a half-hearted data, which is not complete, which will lead you into trouble at the end of the day. So start the process right now is the best practice that I would say. For example, at Facebook, when I was at Facebook, like just giving an example,
Hmm.
so we had a very good process into this. Any new application that was being launched, any new service, any new change, it had to go through a privacy review, where you actually need to tell them that this is the data that we are collecting, right? And it's not that this privacy review will happen initially. This privacy review actually happened after building the application, right? There were two things. You do initial review, that okay, like this is what we are building, this we might use, okay, and then it was like you build it, you test it out, right? Like do A/B testing and stuff. And before launching it, you actually have to get the privacy team's approval that hey, like do the complete impact assessment. That this is the data we are collecting. This is where it is being stored. This is how it is being used, right? This is where it will be shared. For example, let's say marketplace data might be shared with ads, so that also needs to be told that hey, like data was collected for marketplace purposes, but it will be used for showing ads. So that complete visibility, it took like 5 years to actually do that, and that too at the scale of Facebook. So yeah, I mean,
So
those are some of
basically,
the
what you're suggesting is a best practice would be privacy by default that we
yes.
have. So if we implement that at a grassroots level while building the applications, then this would not be a problem for the upcoming time. But yes, legacy data will still be a bigger challenge for them,
Yes.
a big chunk of data for
Yes,
them.
and also I think like the thing is that like right, companies like us, our partners like 𝗲𝗲 are there to help with that process. It's not that there is no help available outside. It's just that that internal push should also come. Like it can't be just an external team solving 100% of it. Like 𝗲𝗲 would need help, or would need help to solve this problem for you.
Yeah, correct. And on this, Apurva, I was discussing with a client only, and he said that I have 70 different products and 70 different data points and different purposes.
Correct.
Now, when I'm informing my legacy customers, I won't be able to send 70 notifications to them. So
Correct.
it will be spam to them. How can I
Correct.
solve this? So these are some challenges that we are facing with dealing with legacy data.
Right. I mean, that's definitely would be there, and I think the best way would be to not to spam the user by completely understanding that is that. So basically, like 70 different purposes might not be using those 70 different data. It might be possible that five of the data like types are being used for 10 different purposes. Similarly, like likewise for other things as well, right? And that's where the difference comes up, that you don't need to spam the user, you don't need to hide things, you just need to tell things to the user in a nice way by having a complete understanding yourself at the first place.
Correct. And basically all your data items should have a purpose mapped to it.
Correct.
It's a bigger privacy risk,
Right.
right? So the compliance, I'll just once again run through the compliance best practices that we do with the legacy data right now. Is what we do is we identify the personal data, we do a purpose mapping, then we provide clear notices to all our data principals, that what data we are collecting, what purpose we are collecting it for. Channel can be an SMS, email, pop-up notification, depending on the obviously the capability of the application. And then the vendor contract, whatever vendor contracts we have, we make sure that all the privacy rules are followed there. Now,
Correct.
Apur, if you like to add on to this.
No, I mean that definitely makes sense as such, Amar. And yeah.
So there was one question around this. So if we have taken a data from a data subject or data principal, and we did not take consent in the past, now if we are taking a consent, so should we record this as reconsenting, or we should just send them a notice and that would be it for our side as a consent?
So I think like again we had this discussion with our customer yesterday as well, or 2 days back. But as far as our understanding goes, and right now how we are working with the different organizations is that first send the notice, right, and provide a redressal mechanism like a consent removal mechanism basically, so that if someone doesn't like if someone has acknowledged the notice but want to remove certain consent, they can just go like provide them the information that this is how they can remove the consent, right? Give them the link, give them the redirect them to that page. But notice is separate as well as consent is separate, like those two are two different things.
Correct. I think we are good with the presentation. Apur, you have any more points for our audience, or we can open the room for
No,
any
I
questions?
think I try to cover things holistically as much as possible. I think one of the things is that also I want to add is data analytics is one of the important use cases, right? That a lot of companies have, and everyone trusts their data science, data analysts to do the right things, right? But not I haven't seen more than two companies out of talking to almost 40 companies who have clarity to what is going on in the data science world, right? Like people are doing random shit. They have 5 copies of the same data. And in fact, I used to make that. When I was a data scientist, I never thought, yeah, like I was like, this will make my life very simple. Just create another pipeline, create another copy of the data for only this data range so that I can feed easily into my ML models, right? That used to happen very often. The thing is that you can't change that behavior, but at least you can get the visibility into that behavior so that there is no breach occurring. And if so, if any such thing is happening, you can at least stop those certain behavior,
Yeah.
right? So that's my 2 cents on this.
Okay. That's a perfectly valid point. I think we'll open up this for the audience if they have any questions around this.
So I don't think there are possible questions. Uh, but yeah, like we can wait for a couple of minutes before closing this.
Yeah, sure. We'll wait for a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions. I think, Apur, we are good. No one has any questions.
Okay.
And thank you for the informative session. It was great
Thanks, Omar.
with you.
Good. Thank you, Omar. It was really nice talking to you.